Good evening, everybody. I wanted to find out the nature of, the description of, and the characteristics that are needed to prove a case of torture in a court. So, of course, I asked AI. But before I get into it, please hit the thumbs up. Helps the channel grow, get the message out there. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading on January 21, 2025. And the reason I ask that is because there is no statute of limitations on torture. So there are statute of limitations on, depending on your state, and then, of course, the federal laws on bringing a lawsuit against certain crimes, but not on torture. Okay, so the definition and description of torture is as follows. Torture is the intentional infliction of severe physical or mental pain and suffering on a person, typically to extract information, obtain a confession, punish, intimidate, or coerce them, or for personal gratification of the perpetrator. You know, they're sadists. Torture is universally condemned under international law, including the United States, including the United Nations Convention Against Torture, which is UNCAT, which defines it as follows. Any act by which severe pain and suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining information or confession, punishing them for an act they or a third party have committed or are suspected of having committed, or intimidating or coercing them for any reason based on discrimination of any kind when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or the consent or acquiescence of a public official or any other person acting in an official capacity. Torture does not include pain and suffering arising only from lawful sanctions. So now, when it says typically to extract information, obtain a confession, punish, intimidate, coerce, etc., you have to understand the tools that are being utilized against people these days is of a technological nature. So there is the ability to put somebody to sleep, to use the neuro-linguistic programming, to hypnotize, to scan a brain, implant a brain, watch people through their eyes, hear through their ears. That is in and of itself extracting information. This is an invasion of privacy. It is a violation of intellectual property. It's a violation of being safe in your home and in your person. And for targeted individuals, this is 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for year after year after year. So some of the characteristics that are needed to prove torture in court are as follows. To prove a case of torture in court, the following elements typically needed to be established. 1. Severe pain or suffering. Physical, intense physical pain, injury, or harm. And mental, extreme psychological trauma, humiliation, or fear that meets a high threshold of severity. Number 2, intentionality. The act causing pain or suffering must be deliberate and not accidental. You know, like when You're outside on your farm, and they have a cat attack you. And while the cat's attacking your legs, somebody's remotely cutting a triangle in your right forearm on May 1st, May Day, the witches' high holiday, through my clothing and left no, even not even a little teeny dot of a hole on 2 shirts. So number 1 is severe pain and suffering, physical or mental. Number 2 is intentionality. Number 3 is purposeful motive. The infliction of pain or suffering must serve a specific purpose, such as 1. Extracting information or confessions. 2. Punishment or retaliation. You know, like drawing the letter V everywhere, like for vendetta, whatever. Intimidation or coercion. Discrimination based on race, religion, nationality, or other factors. You know, like being a woman. You know, since like 72% of the individuals on the targets list are women. Number 4, involvement of a public official or an agent. Torture is often considered an abuse of power and is tied to acts by government officials, law enforcement, or security personnel, individuals acting under state authority or with state acquiescence. Number 5, the exclusion of lawful sanctions. The act must not arise solely from lawful actions, such as penalties imposed by judicial systems. Through excessive or abusive application of such sanctions would be challenged as torture. Number 6, evidence of harm and accountability. So what you would need is testimonies of victims or witnesses. That's why they don't want your testimonies online. That's why, you know, Ella Fraud, remember Ella Fraud? She did interviews for years, and then she took them all down, got rid of her website, and the domain name is for sale. Yeah, and at one time, I believe she might have even been an officer of TJ, you know, targeted justice. I don't remember. That was back in 2017. I believe she was. So evidence of harm and accountability, testimonies of victims or witnesses, medical and psychological evaluations documenting the extent of harm, photographs, videos, or forensic evidence, documentation or testimony showing state involvement or acquiescence. You know, like when you file incident reports and they don't come to take your evidence, or you provide the evidence and nothing is done. Proving torture in court. 1. The burden of proof. It generally lies with the plaintiff or prosecutor, requiring credible and substantial evidence. The legal frameworks. Domestic laws and international conventions like UNCAT or the European Convention on Human Rights often guide the case. Then there's expert testimony. Mental health professionals, medical practitioners, or torture rehabilitation experts may testify to substantiate claims of physical and psychological harm, providing they're not coerced, bribed, blackmailed, or unalived. Forensic evidence, bruises, scars, or other physical markers may serve as critical evidence, like getting a brain scan, x-rays, before and after photos. Torture cases are complex and often require a combination of direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, and expert opinions to meet legal standards. So once again, this was defining, describing torture, and what characteristics are needed to prove a case of torture in court. I look forward to your questions and comments down below, and I'm going to sign off for now.